Hi, this is Elmar Verdakis, and this is my final project for Project 2 of Level Design 2, which is a real-time strategy map design. And this is in a game called Okashi Towers, which I will jump into the level editor of briefly, just so we can look at the two different versions of my level before and after the playtest. So this is my initial one, set up off of Project 2A, which just the sketch, and then this is my final version. So as you can see, Okashi Towers is set up with an aerial view. It has a whole bunch of fog of war, which you just can't see in the level editor. It has a whole bunch of micromanagement, whether it's with the towers that cost a little bit more currency, have a little bit more defense, and are stationary, that you chain at certain distances from either your home base or previously placed towers on your team, which end up unobscuring the fog of war at certain chains that you kind of define along these paths. And this is the main mechanic as to how you clear up this fog of war, in general. There's really not much other way around that, which we will honestly get a bit more into because this led to a bit of error as I was setting up the map. So you got the towers. You've also got a whole bunch of micromanagement with upgrading those, as well as moving around your units, which are your, bases of action and defense. Enemies that require a little bit less currency come out of these home bases, or at least the one that corresponds to you on your team. You select those, send those around wherever you want, use them to fight. There's some modifiers at the bottom when you're actually playing that have, give them like special effects over certain intervals that you can, set that off, have a bit even more choice there. That's pretty much the main basis for the game. There are a whole bunch of different types of characters that correspond to the different tiers of enemies, just to make them visually different and that kind of thing. So for this level in particular, the hook is 3v3 combat, specifically by breaking through enemy troops that are, neutral to the teams. They're kind of aggressive regardless, as well as, choosing how you want to get across and destroy the other team's bases through different paths. This middle section here being, some smaller paths with some more enemies, which, gives the opportunity to potentially walk through to the other side a bit quicker, but also, having to deal with those enemies as you do that. These enemies respawn at very long intervals, so when the time kind of stretches on a bit, they'll end up coming back when it's kind of a fair point for them to do so. Or these longer paths on the top and bottom that, take a bit longer to do, have some less enemies, and it's a safer bet, but, if there's a rush happening, then you're going to want to strategize between those two options. There's those, and then there's, the resource pots that you start with, near the home bases and in the corners here, to kind of, encourage this exploration and, also kind of end up initially starting off this economy before starting off combat in general. So the gameplay loop intends for the player to, prepare their troops, maybe try sending some across in smaller numbers before getting at the naturally aggressive troops, which spawn at the start, and taking smaller dives throughout in loops to eventually break through to the other side of the map for good, and then finally destroy the other team's bases. So as you can see, obviously there's a lot of symmetry in the layout. It's generally radially symmetric and leads to some engaging gameplay and no real reason for lack of balance between the teams. With these intertwining pathways and differing lengths of these pathways, the openness and safety as such varies as well, especially in those corner points nearest to the bases, which aren't especially designated, but can act as pretty potential choke points and points to keep larger defense on to stand your ground once things get a little more tight. There's a lot of start resources close to the bases, as I mentioned, which wasn't initially the case. That was, kind of a point of critique. They were only in those corners and not in front of the bases at all. And also, they're now added as well in smaller amounts in those corners in order to, encourage that exploration. So the map is a bit bigger in comparison to maps that come with the game itself. So I left some things fairly open and also set some spawn timers for neutral enemies to longer intervals than I had them in the initial version to complement this. As initially I realized I had had them spawning a bit too quickly. also left the player a larger number, like limit of towers and units to place in the map, since this is something that can be tweaked as well, as you can see in the top left corner over here. I initially had both of those set to 100, but that was excessive, so brought it down to a fairly reasonable number. This would definitely need a lot more testing in order to fine-tune those numbers, but, you know, according to testing, combat does really end up picking up a decent amount, like just, you know, several minutes in, but not too quickly. So I think, you know, keeping those fairly high, but, you know, not going too crazy with it was a fairly reasonable thing to do. So as you can see visually, I kind of just changed some stuff up, cleaned up some of the edges, made stuff varied, like some stuff's cracked, some stuff is very clean, and, you know, in the corners here and stuff like that, those are like all specifically designated tiles for everything to connect well. And yeah, so did that with the main platforms and added some outline behind it in order to just make the environment feel a bit more full. Same thing with, you know, all of these varied like rocks and plants of different colors here, some crystals as well. So, you know, in 10 minutes I wouldn't be able to get through a full play of this anyway, but I will just kind of show you how this is all set up. I will add a bot here. Let's do set it up 3v3. Select the map and we'll start it up. So with critiques of the level, Fog of War was very annoying, but as it turns out, this is just not the kind of game that allows that to be fixed, as that's a core piece of the intended experience of the game. So, you know, I tried at one point filling it with like some static, friendly people in order to, you know, light up this space, but they tiled differently depending on, you know, whenever you like started the level. Like, it wasn't consistent, so I couldn't even, like, it would have looked visually scuffed even with that, but it would have been a lot worse. So as you can see, I'm just making some troops, just bring them over to these resource pots and killing some stuff. Some other stuff I've changed is, you know, those time intervals. The spawning units at the very center spawn every 9 minutes after they spawn at the very beginning. I also moved these pots to the bases, and also kept some in the corners. The enemies that spawn at the far corners, however, where, you know, the players are, you know, encouraged to bring a bit of enemies every once in a while, spawn every 2.5 minutes. So these actually kind of follow the player and are a bit aggro in that way. So it's a bit less, but, you know, a bit more consistent there. Well, I also, you know, obviously did a whole bunch of cleanup with those materials and things. I will spawn some more here. Added some objects along the path, that kind of thing. In doing this, I also ended up very slightly opening up certain parts of the level, you know, making the pathways a little bit less kind of, you know, thin. But, you know, that wasn't much of a change. That was just, you know, to make, you know, the edges of everything feel pretty clean and not have, you know, too much cutoff. So, you know, it's a simplistic game with, you know, a bunch of units and tower chaining and the like. I'll see if I can get a, you know, a tower going on here. I was told generally that it has a pretty good layout. The center quicker pathways, you know, are blocked up by those larger groups, and a couple enemies are lingered on the side that, you know, give really that aspect of choice. There's a lot of complexity in the map layout, but, you know, as complex gameplay as the players facilitate. So you can directly run across, and, you know, choices in staying back to, you know, get the cauldrons and fight naturally aggro enemies in the beginning, you know, you can choose when and where to do that. However, I didn't realize that pooling enemies, you know, making a whole bunch at the very beginning and, you know, just keeping them here before, you know, sending them out and, like, you know, berating the other side would be, you know, much of a strategy that would be here. So, you know, I thought that was very cool, especially since the enemies at who aggro from the corners don't really, they kind of balance this, you know, the player isn't, you know, just left here with no threat as that's happening. So even if they want to do that, it runs pretty well. When it comes to technical issues, there really wasn't anything besides the small weirdness with tile placement on the map, which I figured out pretty, you know, quickly enough. So as you can see, as, you know, stuff gets revealed, that is, safe to me. You can, see it show up, and, stuff gets lit up. And yeah, you cut across, kill these static enemies, these moving enemies come in, and yeah, you cut across and destroy, exactly what this looks like on the other side behind the fog of war. As obviously I wouldn't have been able to get through a full game of this in this 10 minutes, I just wanted to show, the full layout of the map, especially since it has all this fog of war, and yeah, just kind of show as much as I can, considering I couldn't show the full progression of the level. So yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, hope you like my level. Thanks for watching.